Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight from Central Florida, I have Professor Pixel Young, 20 something, that has a lot to say about this movie, Infinity Pool, starring one of the Skarsgards. And Mia Goth, who, of course, will be discussed quite often in this film because basically it's hers and hers alone. And it's directed by, I believe, Brandon Cronenberg, the son, Mr. Cronenberg himself, who's known for body horror and people like to say sci-fi, and it's a special subgenre number two. I will start
Mhm.
off because being a first watch for you, and I believe not knowing too much about Cronenberg or body horror in general, and being the young 20 something that you are, I will say this. Well, I think this is a decent movie. I have no problems with the slow ending and second half, which is the biggest complaint most people have. I do feel it's not as hardcore messed up and strikingly visual as a lot of people like to say, although I do like it. They are in there. I just think the majority of movies out there today, especially these comic book ones, have taken away from the fact that there's plenty of directors out there that have incredible shots and things that they're trying to do. And this really, honestly, to me, Pixel, it's a comedy. It's a Low T SKARSGARD. I mean, who'd have thunk it? He's a hunky man meat kind of guy, right? A Skarsgård. Come on, this guy's Tarzan. He's a vampire lord. Don't forget, he was a male model in Zoolander. So this guy Skarsgård's the real deal. He's not small. He's a big dude. And here he is as a big wimp. And so it's basically what happens if you're not taking care of yourself as a man fundamentally, because then, everybody else takes control of you and bad things happen. And if you're ultra rich, some people like to say this movie's a meditation of it. You can get away with murder, literally, figuratively. But the comedy part is how they do it, because as everybody knows who's watched this, if you're a rich person in this particular situation, which will be described to you shortly, you get to have a clone of yourself made. But the only catch is you have to watch it get executed by the person you did wrong, which is kind of weird and actually nobody talks about. However, I'm going to, and that's what makes this show extreme. But overall, I like this film. I thought it was done well. I'm curious about your initial take and what you want to discuss and do a deep dive into as far as this movie, the themes and such.
Yeah. Um, the key things that you just brought up in the last couple minutes are elements that could be really almost plotted towards this film for exploring, if it actually explored anything. I wanted to like this movie. I was going through
Uh
it, and
oh.
I was
Oh.
giving it the benefit of the doubt. And, like, you're watching like you said, Crazy Rich. Oh, they get to literally get away with murder. Only catch is they have to watch a clone of themselves get murdered. And whenever you have something like that, okay, that's interesting. I like seeing where this is going. You're watching as basically he gets punked. That's what this film is. He
Yep.
gets punked by the other rich people.
Yep, he does.
This
He's a bitch.
and yeah, he is a bitch. He absolutely is.
That's the funny part of it.
Yeah, see, but here's the thing. They're all still horrible people. All the people around him are just the worst of the worst. And as you're sitting there watching as they are just totally deprived, and they're going at each other, they're doing horrendous things to random people all around, as you're watching that, you're looking forward to seeing, okay, what's the story of this movie? Rob, other than this guy gets beat up on by some rich bullies, what is the story of this movie?
Well, the way it's presented is this, and we'll get into it here. We see Skarsgård is a writer that wrote something, and he's looking for quote unquote inspiration. That old bullshit artistic thing, right? So he's not a producer in that sense, but his wife, she, her father is the publisher that he got his book, so he feels some guilt about it. Which I like the fact that he brought that up earlier. I think that's a legitimate point, and I don't know that that necessarily makes him a weak character, but we understand that that's how it is. But as they say over the dinner date when they meet Mia Goth and her, I believe, husband, I'll just say lover, says, yeah, well, he married rich or whatever like that. And he's like, shit, like he's getting beat on or like that. Cause it's not like he's taking advantage of her intentionally. It seems like he generally, like I say, it's a Low T SKARSGARD. He's like, yeah, I just feel really bad about it because I haven't written anything in 5, 6 years. Nobody really read my book and all that. So we understand where he's coming from. And then you look at him and you go, God, he's so damn good looking. He's just kind of nice male presence. And that's the funny part is I'm going, really? Skarsgård wanted to do this role? And I thought it was funny, but here's the thing. When they meet this other couple that's rich, what do a lot of rich people suffer from? People sometimes say boredom, especially if it's not earned money, if it's inherited, which is that angle's really not explored. When you say that the people around them are really, really bad, I honestly thought, and this is why I think the second act failed a little bit, but different from what most people are saying, is this. I thought that it was going to turn to almost like a mystery in that it was going to be left up to the viewer to decide if the original Skarsgård, once he accidentally hits somebody and goes through the whole idea of having the clone made, would the real Skarsgård, Skarsgård number one, be the one actually killed rather than the clone? And a part of me thought this would have been a great feminist type movie if his wife, who clearly from the very first scene on and then later on the movie leaves, doesn't want to do anything that he wants. She just wants to do couples thing. And you know what? She's right. That's the beauty of it.
Mhm.
She's not a bitchy woman. She's not nagging or anything like that
Yep.
at all. She's completely right. And I thought, what if this had been a great way to say, hey, if you're rich, you can do what every woman's fantasy is, and that's turn your man into exactly what you want him to be. So I thought that was pretty obvious where they were going with it, where when the clone Skarsgård is getting stabbed by the son of the person that the Skarsgård number one ran over, I thought, wow, that's a pretty good bit of acting because it's supposed to be real. It's supposed to have all the same memories and all that stuff. Forget the science part about it. It's not science fiction. Movie is not that at all. It's just a convenient plot device. Um, I really thought they were going to go that way with it, where she would go through having, hey, here's my man who's identical, but he's a little different now. Maybe he's learned his lesson. I thought it was going to be so fucking smart that way and clearly progressive in that nature. And they didn't do it, which
Yeah.
I thought
See,
that was so obvious, right? But they
so
didn't.
you saw that. What I saw was a different direction. I saw that the wife wasn't going to be a huge part of it. She does end up just leaving because he ends up screwing around with this group of rich people.
Intentionally, too.
I thought this film was going to be their actions, their deprivation is going to such a level, and that they go too far. There's a very key scene early in this film with people wearing what looks to be these masks, and they are
Mhm.
freaky. They are messed up masks that look like actually just people, just all morphed.
Did you think of this as a horror movie?
I,
Seriously.
I wanted it to be. I thought it was going to be, but it wasn't.
I
It
agree.
was
It's a thriller more than anything.
yes, and it easily could have been because you see those messed up masks. I thought, okay, but where's the string? How are they keeping it on their face? The ones at the resort at the beginning, because you couldn't see that. You just see these messed up looking individuals. So I thought this group of rich people, they screw around. Oh, they get copied and killed and over and over and over again. I thought eventually they would turn into the monsters of the masks they end up stealing, like quarter into this movie. I thought
Right.
they were going to become the monsters that they are acting like. But this film does not explore that at all. This film doesn't care about that. The film forgives their characters, saying, oh, no. They just go to these horrific levels. They're just horrible people. And at the end of it, they get to go home.
I love
Everybody
it.
gets to go home.
It's
I
such a rip.
hate that.
Oh, really? So let's back up and let's kind of go in order a little bit. Some key scenes here too, and flesh this out a
Go
bit
ahead.
because everybody wants to talk about the hand job and Mia Goth. Um, so what it is they're at this exclusive ultra private resort with the razor wire, and there's a great shot of them when they with Mia Goth's couple decide to leave, and of course she's younger and her lover's older, but when they decide to leave, you see the fence with nothing but razor wire on it. Like the imagery of it, like almost being a prison in a way. I thought was cool. And there's some discussion about class envy or warfare here, in that they talk about how the locals don't like the rich people because they come in and have no appreciation for their culture, and I get it, but you can argue stuff about borders and everything else too. But what I thought was interesting was just the self-loathing that Skarsgård had here. Why I call him Low T, because as a couple, they go out to this nice little pretty secluded little beach area, and they're eating and having drinks or whatever, just kind of chilling or whatever. And you can tell Skarsgård's got a wandering eye. Not that he's trying to seduce her, but he's just fantasizing like a lot of guys do. Because Mia's given the looks, and what a lot of people like about this film is that there's certain shots that are done really well. The way early on it spins in a complete circle, kind of making you feel disturbed. The score is really nice, but even here, a lot of times when they're conversing, they start zooming in on her face and her eyes and her mouth as they're looking at each other, so you can tell there's a romantic, sexual, not romantic, that's the wrong word, a sexual connection initially. Romance always comes later with that stuff. And so they're getting ready to go, and he's kind of shit faced. They all are like that, but he's going to drive. So he's like, well, all right, I'm going to take a leak. So he goes off to take a leak. Then Mia Goth comes up behind him, does a reach around or whatever, and we just kind of see it going back and forth. And if it's central to the story, stuff like that doesn't bother me when it's done for shock value. I think that's kind of weak. Here, it's central to the story because she's in charge. And how does a woman become in charge of it? First, she appealed to his ego by saying, oh, are you author of such and such? I read your book. And, he feels like, oh, that's kind of nice. He's like, nobody else did. And, so she's bringing him along slowly. And so then what does she do? She physically takes over because the wife doesn't want to be there and she knows it.
You watch him piss on the rocks, and you watch him splooge on the rocks.
Yeah,
you get what you pay for.
I mean, if that's your thing, that's fine. But it's not about that. But it's he's not being seduced. I think in a way, but this is the pattern it's going down, because when they go to leave and they're driving and all that, he accidentally hits somebody in the middle of the night crossing. It's literally an accident. It's not because he was driving, drunk and like he's going 100 miles an hour, any of those kinds of things. So I thought, wow, the massive amount of guilt that's going to be put on him. And so when he has a way out, well, what are you going to do? You're going to take it if you want to live. So part of me also, kind of going back to what you said a few minutes ago about where you thought this movie was going to go, I thought this might have been a redemption. Hey, here we have a Skarsgård in name only, and maybe it's about him becoming a man at the end and gaining some resolve. Because when they go through the cloning thing, it's some great visuals. Again, not horrific, but just nice, simple effects. On our Dark Shadows revival stream that we're talking about currently, we just finished episode 9, so check that out. We've talked about how effective real simple things like contact lenses can be, and simple makeup and outfits can convey a lot. You get that here, and that's what Cronenberg's known for. Although Brandon Cronenberg, while I thought Possessor is pretty good, his other film that he was involved in, I don't recall seeing it. He's learned a lot from his father. I have no problem that he's following the same path. Some people want to judge him based off that. This movie is just about a few key scenes tied together without going into the depth of things you and I have mentioned, because it became pretty apparent that after he stabbed his first clone, and again, it's a great scene there. The thing that doesn't get explored is the person that crossed the road got hit and killed. I guess it was a farmer. His son, who might be a boy turning into a man, you could argue that, hey, this is a way to turn a man, is through violence. And, the rule is that you can get your vengeance by killing somebody, but you have to be forced to watch it. And of course, maybe in the third world country, you could find things like that happening today that people don't talk about once in a blue moon. But I thought that was a little weird. And I'm glad it was there, but again, they don't necessarily explore it. They present it. So this movie's doing a good job of presenting things of maybe becoming a man, maybe of third world violence, maybe stuff having to do with rich people and tourism in countries they maybe shouldn't be in. Whether you can argue about being cultural appropriation. You've got the younger, older dynamic with Mia Goth in it, who honestly owns every scene that she's in. I know everybody's talking about her in horror. I told you a year ago with X and Pearl what a great job she did. It's continuing here. There's just this great combination in it. And at first I was starting to get a little annoyed with Skarsgård because I thought, man, what a wuss. But then part of me goes, no, this has to be a rib. So, end of the first act, we get him, and we're going, okay, is he going to become a new man? Is he going to be inspired? Is the real Skarsgård number one, was he the one that actually somehow managed to get
They asked that
stabbed and the
question
clone was there?
outright. They asked that question outright. One of the rich people say, do you ever think that maybe you're the clone and the real you died? And like one of the women says, oh, you don't think about that. You don't. But he says, you have to. And that is probably what makes me mad the most. It presents
Yeah.
all these things.
Yeah. It doesn't
All
explore any
these
of them.
things. It doesn't explore any of them. It is an experience. And I think that there are plenty of movies that go ahead and pull the experience angle where, oh, well, you know, the story of a character or the story of the people involved in here doesn't really matter. None of it really matters. And when nothing matters, I'm just ticked off that I wasted
Or if you
time.
don't have a character that you're emotionally attached to, that makes
But
you
I
want to
could
see it.
have.
All right.
I could have, because you do start to feel bad for Skarsgård here,
That's true.
especially towards the end when because they pull him in, they do the horrific shit to random people on the island. Oh, look, it's the cousin to the cop that lives right up the hill. Let's go ahead and take his hooker. Let's hang him at gunpoint. And then somebody tries to shoot him. They shoot back. They all end up in jail, and they all have to watch each other die. And you know, they really paint it like, oh, look, you can see them all waiting in that in the prison surgical outfits that they have. And then they're all pulled, they're put in the blockade, and they slit their throats. And you feel bad for Skarsgård because, well, no, he did one bad thing that was an accident. Okay, he doesn't require this, but then they're alive and they're applauding in the rafters as they watch their bodies just collapse. And then they keep going. And Skarsgård in this film he does get taken over by Mia Goth. You're right. But there's a moment where they say that they have the police captain, and they have him dressed in the uniform. They have a bag over his head, and Skarsgård goes ahead and just starts beating the shit out of him after breathing in this drug they use to have an orgy. So he breathes it in. He starts kicking the shit out of him, throwing water, pissing on him. And then you can see her take off the bag, and it's just a body double of Skarsgård. And at that moment, he decides, no, this is too much. He can watch himself get killed all day.
I'm tired of beating myself up. I'm Low T SKARSGARD.
Yeah. So he goes, he grabs it, he tries to run, and what do these people do? They stop him. They stop the bus, and they say, I will shoot everyone on there if you don't give him up. And he runs in the woods. He gets trapped in a barn, which actually had an interesting scene. And that pisses me off too. A lot of these scenes could be considered interesting if they mattered, but nothing else matters. But no, when he pictures the son coming to stab him because he recognizes his identity of self in that moment, it doesn't matter. He wakes up for real, and outside the rich people are waiting with a naked, animalistic version of Skarsgård that they call Dog. And kill the dog.
Like, hey, I get to fight my naked self. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and actually, he goes ahead, he takes a knife, he throws it, and says, fetch. They let the dog loose, and the dog just tries to attack Skarsgård, I guess. And yeah, it could be something about how man has to fight himself. Fight his true nature. It could have been there. It wasn't there. None of this matters. That's the thing. After he beats him to death with the blood on his hands, you have to be born through blood. And then he sucks on Mia Goth's bloodied tit because she rubs it on there.
I love it.
It's just...
she's nurturing him back.
It's over. She's nurturing him back. It doesn't matter. He ends up being hollow. He calls his wife, yeah, it's the end of the season. I'm coming home. I'm so sorry. Bye. And then he doesn't. He rides on the bus with the rich people, and they say bye. The woman doesn't really care, and everybody leaves. And he waits at his plane, and he looks out there, and instead he just sits on the island alone.
A loser.
Loser. He is a total loser. But it's not... I don't think that it's pathetic. It is totally pathetic. You had all of these interesting things to go ahead and use them, and you decide to utilize none of the tools that you created. It pisses me off.
Wow. And the thing too is again, like I say, plot it doesn't have to be great. It can be something simple, right? Usually emotionally you're attached to watching something, and sometimes the dialogue doesn't have to be that important, and you don't have to delve into some really high concept idea or something like that that's a mind fuck or whatever. You know, like when you like if you've never seen Planet of the Apes and you watch that for the first time when you're a kid, you're like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. I mean, it's really about what happens, not the idea itself. And but you're buoyed by Charlton Heston as a stranger in a strange land kind of thing, something that on an instinctual level we can all as human beings relate to. So that's why relationships are so important. And here, unfortunately, this is not a movie that ultimately said, okay, we're going to use this situation to let the couple either reconcile or split up, or show the how men are, how women are. It did bounce from a couple things, and I have no problems with the drug use in here and the trippy scenes. A lot of people are talking about how they're disturbed by it. It's like, come on, more people are taking drugs now than ever before, of all different kinds and different potencies. If that's what you do, more power to you. And so I'm surprised a lot of people seem to be a little bit bothered by it or consider this movie a bit shocking or graphic, because it's really not. I mean, okay, a handy that's has to be filmed a certain way so you don't really see anything. That's not shocking, especially when all the amount of stuff that's ready available on the internet now that it wasn't 30, 40 years ago. I mean, that's the surprise to me, is people talking about how shocking and horrific this film is. Like, no, there's some nice visuals and there's some things done well. One of the problems too with relationships I wanted to mention too is Mia Goth and her older lover. They have a couple that they play around with too a little bit, and they're older. They're MILFs or whatever you want to call them, that type. I mean, they're swinger types. So in the drug thing, you see that they're all having sex with each other, and it's basically like a low grade budget film. And again, you don't see too much. You see some boobs or whatever, but I mean, it's not hardcore. It's not graphic in that sense. It's just done in a pseudo trippy sort of way to imply that they're on the influence of drugs, and they need that as an escape to give in to their carnal pleasures, which again, rich people problems, expensive drugs, weird stuff, just so you can go have sex parties, Eyes Wide Shut was known for that as well with Tom Cruise, and everybody shits on that movie. I think there's a lot more in that than the big famous orgy scene and all that rich people have, but that's still a human thing. But again, it doesn't matter if, you don't care about any of the characters. You're not anchored around any of them. And when Mia Goth is someone you go, oh, she's just delicious in her role. She's like the Angelique of this movie, because the Low T thing, you can go, okay, I kind of feel sorry for him, but fight back, do something, you know, um, realize it's all bad and then kill them all, even though that's a weak ending. Do something with it. And again, the movie
I
didn't have to have a big resolution or some oh my god moment at the end that made you realize everything. I liked how it went low key at the end, where they're like, hey, we're going to go back to LA, do our thing about. They're talking like normal human people. They just happen to be rich and could do things others don't. That's fine. That's why they really kind of went the other way with him going back being a loser, that he didn't learn anything. But ultimately, what do you have here at the end? You really don't have anything for him. And if he's the one we're centered around, which is how the movie's presented, have something. I agree with you. Make a choice with all these wonderful things that you wanted to introduce early on, whether it's, the feminist ideal of the perfect husband or perfect relationships, open relationships, something, but narrow your focus to one thing. Maybe show a couple different things, but take that one focus, put it through those lenses and see how things happen. And then here they were just displayed. They weren't explored. And that's why most people, I think, when they describe this movie, they'll say, yeah, it was kind of okay, but the second half kind of wandered or got slow because it didn't have direction, and it can be slow. Look, talked on the show about Mandy with Nick Cage and Beyond the Black Rainbow, both by Panos Cosmatos, the son of, I think, George Cosmatos, who did Tombstone from those DVD rentals. Panos was able to finance the films super ultra cheap. Lots of implied drug use and trippiness and mind altering stuff, which is kind of cool if you're in for a psychedelic experience. Unfortunately, here, this movie is neither horrific nor ultimately psychedelic. It just has a few good scenes in it. That being said, I liked it. I'd like to see more by it. I was disappointed in it. I don't hate it. It could have done things a lot better. But again, like I've said before about a lot of things, compared to what's out there today, at least it's trying to do something, even if it kind of failed. It wasn't trying to do the same old, and I'm going to give Cronenberg a pass here on it because of the type of movie it is. Unfortunately, I think it suffered from the fact that he probably one day will do a movie that really hits on a couple of these things. You're like, fuck yeah, this is really good. Where instead of just being one note like Megan, which is entertaining and done well, kind of flash in the pan thing, even though there'll be a sequel, I'm sure.
Yes, there will
It's
be.
not a bad movie. It's just I understand you're being infuriated with it too, and I cannot
Yeah.
blame you for it at all. But
Yeah.
I'm glad I watched it. I was curious because the trailer never seems to tell you everything that's going on, or if they do, like in this case, I go, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what they showed and promised. Why is everybody acting like this is really trippy and scary? It's not. It's pretty tame, really. It's a comedy. It works best as that anyway.
I wasn't laughing. I was just that's the whole thing. This movie is an experience, and when your experience is lacking, it's pathetic. And he may try to explore some of these themes in the future. I don't know. There might be a very good chance that I won't see it because of this film. I hated it. Oh.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's why we talk about it here on the Extreme Movie Show, because it's definitely the talked about thing, and really a lot of it has to do with Mia Goth. And if this were a vehicle for her to kind of, elevate her, and if you want to attach some progressive feminist ideas, you could definitely make a smart
Yep.
horror movie out of it that way, the emasculation of a male and all that. But basically, it was kind of like a fetish thing. It was just, let's just beat the shit out of this guy as much as we can. Let's fuck with him as much as we can. It's so much abuse you can take. Oh, and that's how we just play around with them. And I can see where if
Yep.
you look at it through that lens, you go, well, it worked. But again, even if it's done well, am I entertained by it? And unfortunately, like I say, when you introduce good things early on, it's hard to take them away and expect somebody to like the movie. Whereas if you start off slow and then you introduce those things in the second act and then you're not sure where it goes and then you pick one, I think because of that momentum building, you end up with what I would call a stronger finish, even if it was a simple one like this one. So that's
Well,
where I think the movie kind of was mismatched with where they were placing how they were telling the story.
isn't there a term for a movie that goes ahead, it pulls out, let's say there's a gun on the wall and they show the gun early on. Chekhov's gun, where you see it and it is going to be utilized later. It's already there in your mind. It is set there, ready to be used. Just like earlier in Dark Shadows when we were talking about the knife that she used to cut open her hand and then laid right there.
Yeah.
They pulled out, they had Chekhov's guns all around, and they decided to use none of them. Not a one of them. And it's just pathetic, honestly.
What you're talking about is, to get nerdy, is game theory, which has to do with stuff like, if I've got a cake and we want to make sure it's divvied up evenly, how do we do it? Well, the first iteration is that you cut and then I pick, so we both have that interest in it, that we're each getting a 50-50. When you get to 3 or more outcomes, it gets really weird, and the same thing happens in stories. Verity Princess and Chad's talking about it, and I would say that, yeah, Northman I enjoyed as well. Kind of like Skarsgård movies. I think one way I would describe this movie to most people is that it's a good introduction to what body horror might be considered by people today, because that really doesn't exist. Body horror was definitely a thing that Cronenberg, the senior, really invented. I think we covered Shivers so far here on the Extreme Movie Show, and he's got a lot of them. I think he redid The Fly in '86 with Goldblum. So this is not full-on body horror, and it's not really hardcore sci-fi. It's really more of a thriller. I think you can look at it as, a couple different ways, but I think it's hard because it takes so long for you to make up your mind which way you think this movie's going, that, like you're saying, Pixel, it can be infuriating.
Yeah. Yep. And, I wasn't a fan of The Northman, actually. I'm going to go ahead and admit that now, but it did not piss me off.
Right.
And that's what this movie does. Oh, well. I did get to see Knock at the Cabin as well last night, or the night before last when I saw this one. And I at least enjoyed that a little more. So that eased the pain slightly.
No, Princess, I would say check it out if you want to weirdo stuff. This by today's standards is definitely kind of, whatever. But
as Countess Dupre says, ooh, fetishes.
Yeah, if you like kind of odd stuff, that this is definitely something worth watching, and my tastes kind of go towards that a little bit in its own way. I don't think it's pretentious. I don't. I just think it just didn't execute as well as it could have. Um, I have not seen Knock at the Cabin, so I don't know how it ends. But real
it
quickly, how would you describe it?
it was okay. It was a little safe, but I was able to enjoy it. I think Dave Bautista. You know, I give him a hard time sometimes, but in this movie, I think he really did. He was able to play his character well.
He's better than Ryan Gosling and a bunch of those
Yes,
Disney
he
type
is
actors.
actually.
No, I'm
He
dead
is
serious
better than
about that.
Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, if you're a weirdo, then you have to see this film, Princess. That's just the bottom line. And if this is strictly a horror channel or sci-fi or something along those lines, I mean, this is definitely one worth watching because the themes in it, those are the things that we talked about before. We could talk about Westworld, how they rebooted the show a few years ago on HBO, and how much money they put into that, how they world built that, and the bottom line is while I watched the first 2 seasons, I just go, I can't feel anything for a fucking robot, so I don't care about them, and I don't care if the women hookers in Westworld, take things upon themselves. And all that. I don't care who's the human, where's the conflict. But again, the books, and the movies from the '70s and the films, Westworld, Future World, and all that. You could argue a little bit of body horror in a sense. I mean, I don't know. As a kid, Westworld freaked me out seeing it at the drive-in. But yeah, this movie's not a freak out, but it's got some good imagery in it. You've got to say, at least technically speaking, it's a good-looking film. Can you at least agree with that?
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. I want, like I said, I wanted to like this movie. It could have been good, but
To
it just
clarify, are
wasn't.
you more mad because it bombed out and didn't explore an idea because of its potential, or are you just bummed out because of the way it ended?
Um, I think it's the failure. I could say it's a mix of both, but I think it's just the failure to explore anything that they pulled.
Yeah.
Anything.
No.
Yeah. So, yeah, because see, the thing is, film, in one of its most important regards, you can have a movie that is made with a low budget and it can be kind of shitty. When you are telling a story, and the point of your story, when you're trying to go ahead and do that, that's the most important thing. Your storytelling is the most important element of a film to me. And they totally failed in that regard. They had no story to tell. Not really.
Yeah.
He's just a loser at the end, and we're all losers for watching him.
It is infuriating. It's almost insulting in a way. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, this movie had echoes, like I said earlier, of Mandy and Beyond the Black Rainbow by Panos Cosmatos, both of which we've covered in the Extreme Movie Show. If you want something trippy and weird, check those things out, definitely. Mandy's the more Nick Cage kind of mainstream type way to introduce people to psychedelic stuff, which we really don't get anymore these days. So there's definitely a bit of a psychedelic element into this, which I liked. And allegedly, there's like an NC-17 or X-rated version of this. If that were to ever get released, if it was significantly different, I definitely would give it a watch myself, just because I felt this was, as you said about Knock at the Cabin, a bit safe, despite a handy and pissing on people and throat slitting, which when done right can be effective. So if you describe it in those terms, Skarsgård on a leash, that's kind of funny too. But yeah, it works best as a comedy. Otherwise, I'd be mad like you.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
nobody's
couldn't
heard of
find
Beyond the
anything to
Black
laugh at.
Rainbow, but check it out if you're into the weird. I would start with that. Anything you need to plug here before we call it night?
I just want to remind people that next week we are not going to have any shows on the Extreme Movie Show,
If so, it's
including
pre-recorded. Yep.
Dark Shadows. So make sure to come back the week after the Super Bowl for episode 10 of Dark Shadows. If you aren't watching our reviews, you better be watching the show. That's the only excuse you have. Because that's good. That's good. That's great storytelling, Rob. Fantastic.
No weird sex stuff. No.
Fetishes.
No fetishes. We'll talk more about drug use and some other movies too, because that's a topic that we don't really bring up a lot. And I don't mean just smoking a little pot here and there. I'm talking about the psychedelic experience of, altering your mindset, because that was definitely a thing in the 60s and 70s, not just by hippies, but all the paranoid conspiracy stuff having to do with drugs and altering your perception, specifically LSD. and all that kind of stuff. And this movie attempted to have a little bit of a nerve with that black licorice root type thing that they used as a quote unquote aphrodisiac, which wasn't really central to the movie, but was just another little minor thing they introduced too. So yeah. Yeah, fetish, just a little weird thing that you need to get excited about something. This movie's you could argue it's about searching for something, because you could argue how everybody's souls in there, they don't have a moral anchor, therefore they need that constant stimulation too, which would be a reflection on how we are as a society. But that would be more appropriate if these people were a lot younger, like 20 somethings and 30 somethings, growing up on digital technology, as opposed to the older people that are involved in here. So I won't even go there, man. That coffee's kicking in. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Go Eagles. I want to say that because I'm a Redskin fan. NFC East is the beast. Can't stand those other guys. So who's your pick?
Oh, I have no dog in the fight that I don't
You
care.
got to pick. I don't care. You've got to pick. Make a pick.
It's between the Eagles and who?
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a good night. And as always, remember, stay extreme. Thanks, Princess.